Hello, everyone. So great to be here. Thanks for everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'm Carinne Chambers-Saini. I'm CEO and founder of Diva International, makers of the DivaCup, and also founder of DivaCares. We are so excited to be presenting today's event and thank everyone for joining us. We've had an absolutely incredible response for today's event with people you can see attending from all over the world. I saw Paris, I saw Singapore, I think it's like the middle of the night there. It's unbelievable. And this is the second roundtable we presented during Menstrual Health Month, and we're hoping that it will become an annual affair. Just a bit about DivaCares. That's the social impact program of our company, Diva International, and we're focused on advancing the menstrual equity movement through three key pillars: education, advocacy, and access. At DivaCares, we donate menstrual cups, but we also promote menstrual literacy programs and advocacy initiatives worldwide. Most recently, we made a feature-length documentary, now award-winning documentary called Pandora's Box, and podcast as well to raise awareness about period poverty and menstrual equity. I hope everyone will have a chance to watch and listen. It's definitely worthwhile. And a brief reminder that everyone here receives a complimentary streaming link to watch Pandora's Box that will expire tomorrow, Friday, May 28th at midnight. We're putting the link in the chat here again for anyone who missed it. And as well, DivaCares is proud to offer complimentary screening licenses to groups wishing to host your own screening and discussion event. We are thrilled to see so many groups already taking advantage of the offer, and we hope that we'll see lots more in the coming months. And now we're going to get started. It is my distinct honor to introduce you to our host for today's roundtable. Menstrual health is mental health. I'm super excited about our host. Dr. Danielle Jones, known as Mama Dr. Jones, is a board-certified OBGYN and mother of four who built a following of 2 million across her platforms through her expertise in science communication. She's an expert on periods, pregnancy, and sexual health, and is passionate about educating in an accessible and entertaining way. She's often featured as a gynecological expert by various news outlets and has been featured in New York Times and been even on the cover of People Health. As a recipient of the prestigious Creighton L. Edwards Awards for Compassionate Care, she's a vocal advocate for autonomy and patient-centered healthcare. She practices as a nomadic physician with her traveling family of 6 and is currently enjoying her time at a clinical placement in Hawaii. I wish I was in Hawaii right now. That sounds amazing. And without further ado, here is Dr. Danielle, Mama Dr. Jones.
Hello, thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and it's 7 a.m. in Hawaii and it's beautiful, and I'm happy to be here too. So today we are talking all about menstrual health and the overall health of your body. Recently, a new definition of menstrual health was released by a global team of experts. And that new definition is menstrual health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity in relation to the menstrual cycle. And what this definition implies is that access to accurate, timely, and age-appropriate information should be available to anybody who has a period, that you should be able to access materials, facilities, and services to care for your body in a healthy way, that there should be genuine access for everyone to care for diagnosis and treatment of anything that may not be normal or may cause discomfort. Every person who has a period should experience a positive and respectful environment that is free from stigma and psychological distress. And they should experience freedom to participate in all spheres of life as they choose, with no interruption from their menstrual cycle to change that. So as an OBGYN, obviously this is something really important to me and something we need. Just the other day, my daughters, who are 8, were reading a book that I have, and it's a comic book style demonstration of period education, and they love it. It's really wonderful. But after they were reading, I heard them in the room. I went to talk to them, and one of them said, a stigma keeps us from talking about things that could keep us healthy. It's bad. And I said, yeah, you're right, but how did you learn that? I've never talked to you about stigmas. And she said, it's a gray ghost. And I said, okay, well, tell me more. So in this book, there's this gray ghost of stigma. And it's such an accurate representation, this invisible entity that keeps us from being able to talk about things that are normal parts of life. And so we went over that. And then I watched the Pandora's Box film pretty much the next day. And I saw myself in the first story where she talks about how she loved going to school and she wanted to be a doctor. And then she started her period and she didn't have access to products. And if you've seen the film, you know how the rest of that story goes. And I just thought, my gosh, that is so horrible. Nobody should experience the loss of their dreams and education because they don't have access to period products. This is absolutely unacceptable. That is a human right. Education is a human right. Menstrual health care is a human right. So obviously the medical world needs to do better at addressing this. And historically, the way that we've addressed this has been incredibly patriarchal and really honestly abysmal. We're still really behind, and sometimes we still go back to treating menstrual health in that way. But I do think that we're starting to do better. Viewing the menstrual cycle as a vital sign is a necessary part of healthcare. This should be included in every person's visit to discuss any health topic, from a normal physical to an emergency visit in the emergency room to just a regular health checkup for mental health. And we have room for improvement on a global and societal scale as well, from eliminating taxation of products, improving access to free products. Many countries have made these moves to improve access to free products and to improve access to education. And that's one way I've also seen healthcare addressing this, and something that is so incredibly important to me is that we educate in a way that is accessible, in a way that people want to learn, meeting people where they are. And that's really why I exist on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, because that's where this generation of people who have periods get their information from. And if I can meet them where they are, when they're young, when they need that education, then we can actually make a difference. But even that is still not going to solve equitable access to education, because many people don't have access to the internet to get their information. So we have a lot of room for improvement. As a mom, I mentioned I have 2 girls, and I believe that they deserve a space to grow and develop as nature intended in a world that does not stigmatize their normal bodies. And that's one reason I'm so excited to be involved in this roundtable discussion today. I'm thrilled to introduce you to our speakers and looking forward to the discussion that we have about how we can improve access to needed resources with a period for everybody with a period. A little bit of housekeeping before we jump in. If you have questions, they can go in the question box at the bottom of your screen. You'll see ask a question. And if they're for a specific speaker, try to put the speaker's name in it, because we'll try to get to some of those questions at the end if we have time. The chat box is great for general discussion and helpful links, including a tech help link for you if you are experiencing any problems within the live stream today. Our first guest that I am so excited to introduce is Madame Gandhi. Madame Gandhi is an artist and activist whose mission is to celebrate gender liberation. She has toured drumming for M.I.A., Diva Corporation, and most recently Oprah on her 2020 Vision Stadium tour with the morning dance party Daybreaker. She's been listed as a Forbes 30 Under 30 member and is a 2020 TED Fellow. Her uplifting music and talks have been critically acclaimed by the New York Times, Billboard, NPR, and so many more. You will know Madame Gandhi's celebrated 2017 song, The Future is Female, which went viral right around the time of the first Women's March on Washington. And for those of you who have watched the Pandora's Box documentary, you'll also know that in 2015, Madame Gandhi chose to run the London City Marathon free bleeding without the use of menstrual products. This was an event that brought on hate and brought on love, but made her one of the most inspiring voices in menstrual equity movements. So welcome, Carinne, who performs under the name Madame Gandhi. We're so happy to have you.
It's an absolute joy to be here. It's so good to see you, Mama Dr. Jones. I'm a big fan of your work and very grateful for your incredible work on social media, meeting women and folks of all gender expressions where they're at.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be talking to you. So you really came into the spotlight first in the 2015 London Marathon. Obviously, you have done so much more than that, but do you still feel the reverberations of that as a defining event?
I do. I find I often open my social media and people are tagging me, citing the story as a source of inspiration, or young people saying, I didn't want to go to volleyball practice today, but then I thought of Madame Gandhi's marathon, and here I am playing volleyball in my period. Whatever it is, it gives me a lot of joy. And the interesting thing with that particular story is that, and people ask me all the time, was it planned? And it wasn't. I showed up to London Marathon that morning. It was my first marathon. I was so nervous and realized at the start line I was about to be on day 1 of my period. And for anybody who's watching this who does not have a period, let me tell you what you're not trying to do on day 1 of your cycle. Okay, it's run 26 miles. Yeah, 42 kilometers, just like that. And so, like any of us, I was evaluating my options: a tampon, a pad, a menstrual cup. I didn't have any of these things on me, and I was like, I would rather bleed freely than use any of these products that don't seem appropriate for 4.5 hours of running. And that's what I did. And did I know that bleeding would be radical? Of course I did. Like, bleeding from anywhere running a marathon is a punk rock move, if you ask me. Like, I knew it was badass. Like, I was just like, how could you shame a marathoner? I'm out here running. The more I ran, the more I thought, wow, women are doing incredible things. Folks who bleed are doing incredible things on their period every single day, all around the world. And yet we're expected to shroud it away in shame instead of celebrating the enormous amount of power that we have to give life to the human race and also continue about with our daily activities. It's so inspiring. It's so expansive. It's so powerful. And it's so wrong that we have to be quiet about it. So when I wrote about this experience, the story went viral, and yes, I do see the beautiful repercussions of that story manifesting to this day.
Well, you're inspiring me. I mean, running a marathon for me, not on my period, would never be an option. So that's incredible. And I've never even really thought about it that way, but I operate on people while bleeding. These things are really empowering, and we should be embracing it. You're exactly right. So obviously that was 6 years ago now. What are you doing now to challenge menstrual taboos, or how do you incorporate menstrual equity into your work as a gender liberation musician?
When I was a young kid, the biggest thing that spoke to me was music and pop culture. As a kid, I wasn't getting my information from like encyclopedias or science class. Kids are getting their information from the internet, from things that are cool, from pop culture. And that's why I choose music as my medium, and I choose my music videos as my medium through which I convey these messages, because music can be felt all over the world. We open up a YouTube or Spotify and you can listen to a song. And then I want people to listen and say, whoa, did she just reference her own period? Did she just reference her own moon cycle? Did she just say that she doesn't want to be moody, that she wants to work on her own mental health by being self-aware of her own menstrual health? Like, that's really cool. I've never heard of an artist talk about that. That's really cool. I've never thought about my own mental health being connected to my own cycle. How empowering. How empowering to realize that we, as people who bleed, are connected to the moon, that I can look up at the moon and say, wow, it's a full moon, so I'm about 4 days away from when I'm going to start bleeding. It's so profound. It's so empowering. So music is the reason I choose this, because it's this positive, delicious, exciting place to get this information, rather than a place that typically would feel icky and uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love that. And you do it so well, but you make it sound easy, and we all know it's not easy. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing the menstrual health movement today?
I think the biggest challenge probably facing our movement today is maybe that we, as people who bleed, still believe and participate in the false narrative of disgust around our own bodies. Wrong. So wrong. We have to step into our own power. We have to say, it's so amazing that I'm able to do this powerful thing. I can't wait to be able to step into the fullness of my own anatomy. I'm so grateful that my cycle is regular. I'm so grateful that I don't experience pain on my cycle, because last month I had really bad pain. But this month I drank more water. I slept more. I rested better. I ate clean. I didn't have alcohol. I didn't stress myself out. My period is on point. My period is on track. Good. It's a vital sign. Or the next month, hey, I tell my team, this week is my period week. I have a little bit of moodiness around my period. Please don't take it personally. I love you all so much. It's a tough week for me. I'm going to show up as best as I can. Empathy, awareness, stepping into that power. So the biggest challenge is the fact that that's my friend filming us today. The biggest challenge is that we must stop believing this false narrative about our own bodies and about the stigma that prevents us from talking about the power of our own bodies.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Those are such good points. And I think at some point in the film, someone actually said, we are sacrificing ourselves, our comfort, our health to uphold this societal stigmatization of our bodies. Right. And that we have to fight back against that. And that's such an excellent point. Well, I'm really, really thrilled that you're here today. Thank you for giving your thoughts. We're going to move on to Chella Quint.
Give me one second. I want to shout out to the audience that I am wearing this bloody fabulous sweater from Lingua Franca. You can support the Desai Foundation. There's incredible organizations on the call today, but Desai Foundation is running a month-long period drive called their Bloody Fabulous Drive. It helps women and girls and people who bleed in India. So Bloody Fabulous, Desai Foundation, do your part. Okay, thank you so much.
Love that. Yeah.
Thank you, Pandora's Box.
See you in a little bit.
Bye.
That was amazing and inspiring and made me want to run a marathon, but it did make me want to continue fighting for equitable access to menstrual products for everyone. So now we have Chella Quint, and she is an author, teacher, artist, and performer who has become a leading expert on menstrual education in the UK, advising on regional and national policy. Chella coined the phrase period positive in 2006 and started the period positive movement to use humor and joy to challenge menstrual taboos and campaign for better menstrual literacy. In 2019, Chella launched the Period Positive Pledge as a framework for organizations developing inclusive education, policy, and outreach, and an early day motion calling for the government to take up the pledge was submitted to the UK Parliament by MPs later that year. Chella is the creator and performer of 5-star comedy show Adventures in Menstruating. Her first book, Be Period Positive, comes out in July. Welcome, Chella. I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here. Sorry, I'm shouting because I'm in England. So, in case you can't hear me in Hawaii.
I'm so excited to talk to you. Your work is really focused on increasing menstrual literacy for individuals and organizations. And actually on your website, periodpositive.com, you indicate that you can't just say you're period positive. You need to actually work on being period positive. And because of that, you've created a 20-point period positive pledge for people to follow with a charter award and certification that can be earned by schools and workplaces, kind of like a fair trade logo or a B Corp. That's incredible. How did you decide you were going to do that?
Thank you. So it all happened really gradually. I had a leakage horror story when I was at a slumber party growing up. There was a blizzard and I leaked on my period and I couldn't go home and nobody helped me. I got teased really badly. And I really internalized that for a really long time. And then I started thinking about periods as I got older. I was writing fanzines. I was kind of doing like punk rock comedy shows. And I started incorporating this, what I started calling period positivity into my work. It was like body positive and sex positive, but people were, not booking me for shows, even at like squats and punk gigs. And I was saying stuff like, no, it's cool. It's inclusive. It's for all genders. It's period positive. And I started describing that as my work. And because I was the only one using it, it didn't mean anything. It didn't matter. It meant whatever I wanted it to mean. But as I started asking people to use the hashtag to share like my stains TM fake period blood stain, like art activism, and posting their critiques of adverts that they thought were sharing shameful messages and stuff, it kind of grew into more media literacy. And then it started incorporating all of the things that become possible once you examine your embodied shame around periods. So it wasn't always 20 steps. I think it was like maybe 6 or 7 bullet points. And then it was my master's research, which was about, I think, 10 like demands. I used to call it my list of demands. Finally, it was this 20-point pledge that was sort of like the Sustainable Development Goals or the Declaration of Human Rights. I wanted it to be something that was a nice poster of squares that summed up some points really succinctly, but that when you kind of explored them and talked about them a bit more, would help you kind of find your role as a menstrual activist, whether that was on a completely personal level at home with yourself or with your family, or, you know, in a professional setting, or if you were going to initiate some policy, it would help you shape that policy.
I love that. And honestly, I think that's so inspiring just to be able to see someone take their activism from an idea and how it moves into this very radical and meaningful change that you can incorporate into any workplace or business or even just your house. So of those 20 points, do you have a couple that you think are the most difficult or the most significant?
Yeah, I think it's, I don't think that the different ones are difficult and easy for different people. Whenever somebody signs up to take on the pledge, I always ask them, what are your 3 that you think you could do most easily or are already doing or resonate with you? And the 3 that you'll need the most help with or find, you know, the most troublesome. And it's always a different 3 for each person, you know, or organization. And it's amazing. Some people find sustainability really easy. Some people find it really easy to work with big corporations, but not get sort of subsumed by their corporate social responsibility, you know, especially if they sell disposables, because that can sometimes, you know, take over a dialogue. But some people find it really interesting that the last one is that the pledges can change. But I think it's really important to build in growth into our activism. I started doing this in 2005. I made up the phrase in 2006, and it's just exploded, you know, over the last few years. And there were always menstrual activists sort of working separately, but they've all sort of started to converge in this really exciting way. And I don't doubt that we will grow as a people. I feel like the world's going through puberty right now on this topic. And as we learn and grow, the pledges need to change. But the very first one, I think, is also significant because I ask people, or I invite people to use the words menstruation and menstrual more. Because I think when people say, oh, menstruation is a medical word or a science word, I think it creates an unnecessary barrier between everyday words and science words. Because, you know, scientists and doctors get periods. And everybody, you know, grew up in a room that was a womb. So whether you menstruate or not, you should feel that the word menstruation is for you. Not to mention, you know, the UK and Europe use the word menstruation in an easily recognizable format in many languages that are on the continent of Europe. So it's menstruation or menstruation, you know, it might be a slight spelling change, but no matter where you're from, you can recognize that word. And I know we say period, my project's even called Period Positive, but saying menstrual products rather than sanitary products or feminine hygiene means we're taking the words sanitary and hygiene that imply dirtiness out of something that isn't dirty, that is something vital, like you say. So those are the most significant for me. But the charter process means that you pick your 3 favorites, see if you're doing them, audit your organization, and then pick 3 more, and then keep going. And you work your way up from bronze to silver to gold until you're sharing your best practice with everyone else. And it can take, like, you know, a year, or like we've got the pilot organizations going up to silver and gold right now, or it can take the life of your business. You can keep evolving and growing, and it doesn't cost anything because the Sustainable Development Goals don't cost anything, you know. And educating yourself, it should be egalitarian. It shouldn't be co-opted by sort of media messages that I noticed had been affecting the menstrual discourse for such a long time.
I could listen to you preach about this all day. I could not agree more. I mean, that's a lot of what I do online is we've got to start using the real words for our body parts and, you know, vulva and vagina and menstruation. And these aren't dirty words because our bodies aren't dirty. So I love that you brought that up as well. So I'm going to now move on to Kim Rosas. We really loved listening to you, Chella. I genuinely could listen to you talk about this all day long.
Well, I have to keep talking. I wrote a book. You can read the book.
Oh, great. I can't wait to read it in July, right?
You can hear about it then. Yeah, I'm recording the audiobook next week. So it's called
perfect. Okay, so y'all go check out Chella's book.
I've got a kid's book in September. So you'll have to
it.
stay tuned for that. There's something for everyone. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so we are going to move on now to Kim Rosas, who is a well-known menstrual cup expert and has been a very, very valuable resource for cup users for many years. Kim's the founder of Period Nirvana, which is an educational site that helps match people to their perfect menstrual product. Period Nirvana's retail arm, Period.shop, curates product offerings from companies that are socially inclusive, ethically minded, and environmentally responsible. I'm really glad to have Kim here to demonstrate how to properly insert a menstrual cup and answer some frequently asked questions about menstrual cup use. Kim, take it away.
I'm doing what I love to do, and I'm so excited to be here, just educating on how to insert and remove a menstrual cup. And at the end, I'll answer a few of the questions that I receive all the time. And when I say I receive them all the time, I'm not kidding, like dozens of messages a day. So first, let's talk about inserting a menstrual cup. First, you do have to fold the cup to insert it. It's not going to go in like this. And I like to show people two basic folds, but there are more. This is the C fold. Just fold it in half. And then this is the punch down fold. And this is my favorite for when you're brand new because it has a really small point of insertion. And you also get this very, very handy handle. And then when you insert it, you just gently guide it in. And you want to allow it to open as high as you can. And that's for your comfort. But if it does open lower than you expected, you can just kind of gently push it up higher until it's comfortable for you. And if you want to check to make sure it's open, you can run a finger around the cup, check for any dents. And one other tip is to kind of give it a little spin, and this can help it open if it doesn't, feel like it's opening for you. And then when it's time to remove, this is the stressful thing for most people, but it takes practice, but it's not that bad. You don't want to just remove by the stem. This is a no-no. It's not a tampon string. You don't just yank it by the stem. What you want to do is, if you can't reach it easily, just kind of gently wiggle it down until you can reach the base. It helps to be relaxed, which I know is like really hard if this is your first time ever removing a cup. Like, I get it. I remember how like nervous and shaky and sweaty I was removing a cup for the first time. One tip is to do it when you're in the shower. You're not worried about mess, and it's just a relaxing environment. So just kind of take a deep breath, because relaxing yourself, your mind, also relaxes your muscles. And if you're tense in your mind, your muscles will be tense, and it will make it a little bit harder. Then you want to reach in and pinch it to break the seal, and just very slowly guide it down. People imagine it's messy, but it's really not. It just takes practice. And then slowly lower, keeping it level. You're kind of in a shower over a toilet, and then dump. And that's it. I know I make it look easy, but it takes a little practice and you'll get there. So now for some of the questions I get asked all the time. Are menstrual cups comfortable? And yes, I would say definitely. As long as it's the right fit for you, you're not going to feel it. The great thing about a menstrual cup is it's medical grade silicone. The DivaCup is like that perfect average starter firmness, so it's not too firm and it's not too soft. This is great when you're trying a cup for the first time. And the medical grade silicone does kind of warm to your body's temperature, so you won't feel it, and it moves with you. So it's a totally different experience than tampons. In fact, I never imagined it would be very comfortable, but when people ask me why they should switch, I say it's for comfort. It's not environmental. It's not money savings. Like, those are great reasons to switch, but honestly, convenience and comfort are like number one for me. In fact, when people are asked about using a cup, if they would ever go back to a tampon, typically they say no, and I'm definitely in that boat. I'd probably buy a menstrual cup if I were traveling and forgot one before I went and bought a box of tampons. And then the next question is, are they messy to remove? It can be. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say it's going to be a perfect experience. And this is, again, it comes with practice. The more you practice, the better you'll get, the less messy it'll be. So a couple of times you might have a little mess. That's why it's good to try it in the shower the first few times when you're removing it, but it does get easier. So again, just kind of hop in the shower, do a little relaxing, just gently move it down, keep it level, and then dump. And then, yes, you'll be a pro. And the last one is, how do you clean a menstrual cup in public? I think I get 50 messages a day on this topic, and I've done a gazillion videos about it. But the simple answer is that menstrual cups can be worn for up to 12 hours at a time, which means that in all likelihood, you're not going to have to empty in public. I've barely been out in public for a year, so that issue really just took care of itself. But if you do find yourself having to empty the cup in public, all you need to do is, just like when you're at home, remove your cup like you would, dump it, and in your private stall, just put it right back in. You really only need to wash it every 12 hours. So when you get home, give it a good wash in your private sink. If you want to wash it in the public sinks, that's your choice, but a lot of people are uncomfortable with that concept. I totally get that. It's, sort of a private thing, so you can just dump it, put it right back in, wash your hands in the public sinks when you're done. And that's it. Hopefully that was helpful, and I will throw it back to Dr. Jones. Thanks so much for having me.
That was wonderful, Kim, and I need one of those cubes for my office. It is incredibly helpful for demonstrating use of a menstrual cup. We're going to move on now to Shane Joseph, who is a registered social worker, gender justice, and human rights activist and consultant with many years of experience in social service delivery, policy and program development, community transformation, and mental health. Shane is the co-chair of the North American MenEngage Network and a director of the MenEngage International Network, whose mandate is Boys and Men for Gender Equality. MenEngage is committed to working as allies with women and women's rights organizations to achieve equality for women and girls. Welcome, Shane. We are happy to have you.
Thank you so much. And it's so good to be here within this space and, just to be a man and to be able to talk about such an important topic.
Yes, I mean, I've been excited about this event and talking to all of you for a while, but it's already exceeding my wildest expectations. This is such a great conversation. So we heard in the Pandora's Box documentary from a male policymaker in Kenya, and he told us how it's important to educate boys at an early age so that they understand the facts around menstruation and don't buy into myths and taboos or see it as shameful or embarrassing. This is something I've been very passionate about. I think that the way that we do education for sex ed in middle schools where we separate boys and girls highly contributes to this. And so I was happy to see that included in the film. It's obvious that MenEngage North America has menstrual literacy on their agenda as a priority, but when, where, and how does that conversation and education about menstruation need to start with people who don't menstruate?
And it is such an important subject matter that we as a movement have come to realize that having dialogue and narrative and having the discussion, it is not optional. Because we have recognized that in our society, we have to sort of unpack, we have to deconstruct, and we have to do a lot of learning and unlearning as it relates to how we raise boys. We have had all of this toxic masculinity. We have had the way in which persons have been placed into the man box. So within the North American MenEngage, and in particular, the bigger MenEngage Alliance and movement, we are really saying that from a very young age, we are going to get into that place where we begin to re-socialize and begin to educate our young men and our boys from a very early age, just as how they would learn all the other things that they would do in life. They would begin to appreciate the importance of who they are, redefining gender, understanding various identities, and taking a very intersectional approach and being able to take the information as it relates to who they are, what it is that they're becoming, and how it is that within their society they have been wronged or they have been given errored information as it relates to who they are. So from a movement, we are really saying that the socialization process, we are talking about the issues as it relates to understanding the body and man, and all of those things need to be taught and needs to be done at a very young age. And I speak about this personally. My son is 9 and he already understands who he is. He knows the correct body name parts, as you were talking about earlier, and he understands the importance as it relates to gender, sex, what it is, and we begin to sort of put in place the power differentials between the different genders and understanding that in a way that is not only intentional, but a way that is authentic, in a way in which we can be able to do that from a very intersecting lens and begin to hold men accountable so that they understand the dynamics of issues of that nature.
Yeah, that so many good points. So I know that, the ultimate goal would be we do this in schools and it's normal and it's a part of education, but a lot of us, like you, are raising boys to don't get that in their schools. So how do you think, just as parents, we can do better starting this at a younger age? And maybe if you had 1 or 2 tips for people raising boys that won't menstruate, what you would tell them?
I would start having and encouraging the dialogue around masculinity and around identity, and begin to get into that place where we have an opportunity to have open, honest dialogue within the space, so that we can begin to teach men how to be a man, what it is to be a man, and move them out of the man box. And when we talk about that man box, we're talking about the fact that, as a man, you do this and you're excited about power and privilege. But we begin to deconstruct that so that boys and men can begin to understand their identity, begin to own that, and realize that you're coming not from a very singular approach, but you're coming from various identities and various experiences. So as a parent, having open dialogue is fundamental. Secondly, men who are acting as fathers or who are acting as role models need to be able to take a lead to hold other men accountable and have this dialogue in a way that challenges other men around the stigmatization, around the fact of the taboos, around the fact that as a man, you challenge your other buddies, whether it's in the shop, in the barber salon, and begin to do that in a very decolonizing way. Because the menstrual health and the discussion about what happens to persons who experience menstruation is not only for those who do that, but for those who don't experience, because our agenda is about equality, respect for all, fairness, and that people should not be going about having to live their life in an insular way just because of what they're experiencing. Holding men accountable through dialogue, through discussion, through challenges, through an opportunity to be able to rethink so that they can begin to have that level of accountability.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such great advice. And I agree, we just need to be talking to our boys, and that requires education for whoever is acting as their father figure if they have one. So I think that, I have hope for the next generation because people like you are helping to raise them. So thank you for being here and chatting with us. We're going to move on to the roundtable and bring our speakers back up on stage. We have a couple of questions to go over there, and then we'll try to make it to our Q&A. We're going to be running just a little bit behind, but we'll do our get some questions answered. So for the speakers, if there's one piece of advice that you could offer the audience or even yourself as an action point to move forward towards a more period positive environment, what would that be? Let's start with you, Chella.
Well, I got 20 recommendations.
Give us one.
I think it's just believe in yourself, trust yourself to know what's right about your body, and practice at home if you're scared to talk about something with your doctor, but don't give up. There is a whole wide period positive world out there, and we got you. We're all approachable, and the reason we're all in this space is because we know it takes a team to get this moving. But don't worry. Trust yourself that your gut feelings are probably right, and your mind is openable. Look at old adverts from the 1920s and 30s. They are just a whirlwind of inappropriate message about menstruation, and they are what got me started. So yeah, I'll put a link in the chat. Yeah, look at old ads, trust yourself, and don't be afraid to start.
Yeah, I've reviewed several old period and sex ed things on YouTube, and you can really see not only how far we've come, but also how we're still not coming as far as we need to.
Yeah, we got a long way to go, but we're getting there. And the ads that impressed me the most were the oldest ones from 1926, and I was still recognizing messages from 2006, and I couldn't believe it. But if we don't question it, we internalize it. If they say secrecy, we say secrecy. If they say discreet and whisper, we don't have to. So let's stop.
Yeah. Love that. Okay, let's ask you, Carinne, what would you say is one piece of advice you could give to the audience as an action point to move towards a more period positive environment?
Own your voice, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, there's power in what you say. In what you say, own your voice, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, there's power in what you say. That's all I have to say.
Well, I love that. I don't think that anyone can top that. What about you, Kim? Any advice?
I just kind of live in a world where I talk about periods all the time. And so it's not what everyone's going to be comfortable with, but maybe we should be. My boys are 12 and 10. They could explain anything you need to know about periods, and they're kind of filtering that out to their friend group, and we're making just a very accepting household. We just talk about what's going on with our bodies. If I'm in a mood, if I'm tired, I say, I'm on my period, like, leave me alone. I just need to rest. This is not the time. And they're like, okay. And that's it.
Love that. Yeah, I just open dialogue and making it normal to talk about our bodies. Shane?
Menstrual health, menstrual hygiene, menstruation, MenEngage. Men has a responsibility to be a part of this. So we begin to hold other men accountable and recognize that your voice matters. You make space, and that as a man, you hold other men accountable to deal with the destigmatization, to deal with the power and privilege and the space that you have with other men. Make space for men to talk about menstruation and talk about the issue that is at hand.
Absolutely. That is so important. And I'm really glad you're here representing MenEngage, because it's actually an organization I had not heard of prior to the end. I think that's so important. So we have a few questions in the question box, and I'm going to just kind of throw them to whoever it seems like would be most appropriate to answer them. But if you have something to say, just feel free to jump in. We're going to start with, how can employers create a safe menstrual health environment? Example, providing sanitary products, etc. So Chella, why don't you start and just give us one or two things you think employers could do to make their spaces more period positive?
So here's stuff employers that I've worked with have done. In the school where I used to teach, they did an audit of their environment, and they did a survey of the pupils. Now, it was originally started by my master's research, but they took it on with the whole school. They wanted to know what the kids wanted their bathrooms to be like, and they talked to staff and pupils, and it linked to what kind of menstrual products they wanted to use. To use a menstrual cup, it's kind of helpful to have a sink nearby. So the cubicles now have sinks in them, and they are all genders. They're gender neutral toilets, because that was what the pupils wanted. But in the old days, you know, it was just one toilet that was locked, and you could only go on break times, and it was always locked or in use. And it wasn't very helpful to anyone, particularly those menstruating. And the other thing that happened was we noticed that during exams, kids were panicked about leaking on their period and getting that flubba-lubba feeling, you know, of the, oh God, my whole period has come out at once feeling that happens sometimes on like day 1 or 2. And I call it the flubba-lubba. But the thing that we realized was the exam invigilators, the people who come in and set up, you know, school-wide testing for you, they don't keep menstrual products in the box, and you can't take your school things to the bathroom with you. So you're sitting there doing your, you know, your like statewide test or something, and there's a teacher or an external invigilator at the front of the room with a clock and, you know, like a whiteboard, the way it goes, and you have to make a decision. And so we put posters up saying there are menstrual products in the bathroom nearest to the exam hall, and an arrow, you know, and a sign. And it was called the Exams Period campaign. It just happened one summer, but it came out of pupils telling me this. And workplaces where there aren't young people look at leave policies, menstrual leave being different to sick leave or other types of reproductive health leave. Even if it's just a policy, even if people don't use it, at least it says to people, we can talk about menstruation here. And the most key thing is that everybody in the organization is on board. I've always said, you know, from the school principal to the staff who run the canteen, everybody should know something about menstruation, whether that's a one-off session or like just how not to wrinkle your nose in panic if someone asks you for a tampon, you know, because those teachable moments can kind of pass on a hidden curriculum, whether you're an adult or a child, and avoiding those and moving on from those is the first step.
Absolutely. That is such excellent advice. I think that's really some great action points and take home points that people can really start to implement, especially if they work in a space where they have some control over these things. One of the next questions is about their doctor. So I will take that question. What can I do if I have a doctor who dismisses my concerns about my period pain? So the first thing I would say is, obviously, if you can switch to somebody that you trust and have a better relationship with, that would be optimal. I know that with healthcare access as it currently is, and the way that insurances work, or the possibility that very likely possibility that you're not insured, switching to a new doctor or advanced practice provider may not be possible. So if you're in a situation where the doctor or advanced practice provider you have is ignoring your concerns and you can't switch, make an appointment that is specifically to talk about this. You know, try to make it focused instead of bringing it up at your annual exam or something like that, and say, I'm having this problem and I need you to help me fix it. And then after that, what I always tell my patients is don't disappear. Don't stop showing up. If what we do today doesn't help, come back and tell me it's not helping, or call me or send me a message, or let me know after whatever time frame we've decided that it's not fixing the problem. Your periods should not be so painful that they interfere with your life, should not be so heavy that you can't do your normal day-to-day things that you want to do. And your doctor or advanced practice provider should listen to you if you're talking about that. We'll move on now to, I think there was a question for Carinne about what would be your advice for people who are menstruating and athletes to best care for themselves and avoid injury? And what do you wish especially young teens knew about this topic?
Specifically about menstruation and sports, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, they were asking about athletes. Any advice for menstruating athletes?
Yeah, it's such a good question because I still think about this to this day. I think I find that the more I go with the basics, like drinking a lot of water, getting proper rest at night, eating clean, eating plant-based, high nutrient-rich foods, allows me to be a better performer and a better athlete, and allows me to do more on those earlier days in my cycle. Usually the weeks where I'm just eating badly and maybe I had a drink the night before, whatever it is, and I'm doing low vibrational activities for my body, it's very hard to show up for my athletics. And so I think it's all about creating virtuous cycles and using your period as an indicator of where you are, as I mentioned earlier on this conversation. I really do believe in that mentality. And in terms of, actual athletics, I'm seeing a lot of products come out with obviously period underwear, period running tights, this kind of thing that allows us to be better athletes while we are bleeding if we feel okay to show up for those games.
Yeah, I think that's really important, the part you added at the end there, if we feel okay to show up. It's okay to give yourself space and grace to rest or whatever you need to do when you're menstruating, or anytime really. This is normal self-care. So if you need to take it easy for a couple of days, that's fine. If you feel like going full force, that is fine too. And great advice about all the different options for period products. I think the running tights that you were discussing are a really great option for a lot of people. And then, like Kim was showing earlier, a menstrual cup is really great for people who are athletic as well. Let's see, we have a question for Shane. They want to know, has the program been taken globally? And they think that it might be helpful to help prevent gender-based violence. And they think it's really awesome that you're doing this.
Yeah, and I think that is what because when we look at some of the mandate of what we promote within the MenEngage movement and in North America, we're talking about promoting accountability. We're talking about dismantling power and privilege. We're talking about the systemic pieces around patriarchy and around getting towards a movement of gender equality. We're talking about sexual reproductive rights. And when we look at gender-based violence in particular, we are of the view that the literature has shown to us very clearly power and control. And we're talking about privilege and we're talking about access. And so within that space, we look at MenEngage and we have a movement in Europe. There is one in the Caribbean, there is one in Asia, there's one in North America. And so the movement is growing and we're constantly calling others to get on board and to support the role of engaging men and boys towards promoting that gender equality.
Absolutely, that's great advice. Oh, we're getting a little bit of an echo. So the next question is a really great question as well. So any tips on for gender non-conforming folks about who menstruate to manage their periods or feel better about them, since a lot of period education is centered around the girl power narrative, which they say is not inherently bad, but is not the most inclusive. I'm going to answer and then I'm going to throw it to Chella because I know she has some information on this as well. For me, I'm going to direct you to my YouTube channel, shameless self-promotion. I do all of my education on YouTube in a very gender inclusive way, and it's available to anyone. I have a very big following of trans and non-binary and non-gender conforming people who feel like their dysphoria is not triggered by the way that we discuss pregnancy, periods, and menstruation on the channel. So if you are looking for education from a gynecologic standpoint, myself and many other GYN doctors on the internet have moved towards being more inclusive, and it's been a very positive change for me, and I hope that it helps people as well. Chella, any advice there?
Yeah, sure. So I'm cis, but queer. So in a lot of queer and trans spaces a lot of the time. And advice I've gotten has been from people who've done sensitivity reads of my work and supported the project as participants. So there are a lot of new books coming out that are all genders inclusive for young people and for adults, including mine. There are a couple from the UK coming out soon. And there are also ways to challenge this through the charter. So the charter talks about all genders inclusive language. And one of the reasons I want to use the charter is to signal to people, like a bat signal, what is welcoming as a resource. But stick up for yourself and get support. There are now organizations and menstrual health outreach projects that are regularly addressing trans inclusion on online campaigns, in their literature, through schools, but also just through conversations and activism. It's a really negative space around the conversation around trans and menstruation. Sometimes ways to keep it positive are to assert your right to be in the space. There are boxer short style period pants that are becoming really popular that a lot of folks that I know like to use, and just open conversations around how gender intersects with periods when you're in a period space. Ask. You shouldn't have to ask permission, but if somebody's running an event, if you reach out to them privately. We do have a calling in rather than calling out thing through Period Positive, but reach out and check in and say, is this welcoming of all genders of menstruator? Or is this a cis women space? And it might be that the person genuinely didn't think about it and are learning and growing on this topic, and will, be happy to assert that, yes, of course, people who are non-binary or trans men who menstruate are welcome. It's tough to navigate. One of the things I do is absolutely ensure that that people being trans menstruators isn't a debate. And another thing I do is try and create a safe space when I work. And if you're looking for folks who are creating safe spaces in their menstrual work, use these phrases, because people know that that's what they have to do when you ask, but they might not have realized that that was going to be helpful before you ask. Just like with disability and other sort of marginalized identities in the menstrual space, like nothing about us without us, and talk to people before you talk about people, and get stuff checked out. If you're going to put something out there, have it vetted by folks who aren't just part of an identity that is marginalized, because that can be exhausting, but somebody who is an expert and does sensitivity reads or is in the menstrual sphere and disabled and queer, etc. But yeah, it's a brilliant question. Just making sure you're getting the right pronouns is a good start for folks who want to know more. But yeah, we got you. It's here. Tell me more if I'm doing it wrong.
I love that. And actually, you're very right, because when I first started on YouTube, I had no idea how important this was in educational spaces. And the switch for me about 2.5 years ago was just people saying, hey, would you consider doing this? And my knee jerk was, I usually just take care of women because most of my patients are women. But when you're speaking to a global population, there's a very large amount of people who don't identify as women, who need information about menstruation and would like to be included in that conversation. And the switch was easy. It was so easy. It took nothing. So I very much appreciate the people who came into my comments early on and genuinely kindly asked me, because that made a huge difference. We have time probably for one more question. So we are going to throw this one to Kim. To the parents, how will you educate your kids around menstruation, especially since the different kinds of products out there? So you're an expert on all of these products, so why don't you help out here?
Actually, there's a really amazing book that I recommend to people. It is called Vaginas and Periods 101. It's a pop-up book, and it's really for that younger set. So there are age-appropriate materials as you go on, but it's nice to introduce these topics very early, and it's not just about period products. It's just about everything in that sexual realm, and it's very age-appropriate. So it goes through pads, tampons, cups, all these different options. And it just puts it out there because our school systems aren't educating about reusable options very often. And so people will go decades until they know that cloth pads or menstrual cups or these other, period underwear exist. And so it's up to them to make the decision. Ultimately, I have had some parents be very pushy at in-person events and say, my daughter doesn't want to use a menstrual cup and I want her to use one. And to the point where she was physically pushing us together and very aggressively wanting me to convince her daughter to use a product. And the young woman was so uncomfortable. And as soon as she turned around, I very quickly told her, you use the product that you are comfortable with. If you ultimately decide that a cup is for you, you can use a cup, but don't have your parent force it on you. It is a body autonomy. It's your decision. So as a parent, I would love, if I had children who were going to menstruate, I would love them to use reusables. Obviously, that's something I'm very passionate about, but it's their decision. Is you just lay out the options and say why they're good and let them make that decision for themselves.
Absolutely. I love that. And for me, having my girls who are 8, I think just having things around the house that if they ask questions, I can show them is really helpful. And obviously that's easy for me as a gynecologist because I have all the things, but, just having maybe one example of each type of product around as your kids get older so that if they ask questions, you can say, here's this one, here's how it works, here's this one, here's how it works. And they'll decide, they'll figure it out. And it's okay if they need to, start with just a regular pad and move up from there into something that's more sustainable or better for their ability to do their daily functions and things like that. So this has been really, really great. Unfortunately, we are out of time for questions. So I'm going to throw it back to Carinne to do our outro.
Hi, everybody. Okay, well, I'm just going to wrap it up. I just want to say thank you so much. I think this event was amazing. I wish we had like 4 hours to talk to everybody because there's so much we could dig into. There's so many more conversations to have. I think the whole point of this is just to get everyone's thinking about these kinds of things, and we can talk more and more about it. But thank you again to Dr. Jones, to Kieran, to Chella, Kim, Shane, for your time and for your insights today. And thanks for all of you for attending. We had a great turnout. I know lots more people. We had, I think, over 500 people register. I think lots more people are going to be able to listen to this afterwards. And we really want everyone to be part of this growing menstrual equity movement. And that's the whole point, normalizing conversations around menstruation, having these conversations that just make things easier and better, and amazing conversations. So we hope you enjoyed the event and enjoy watching Pandora's Box. If you haven't catched it, make sure you get the link. You have until tomorrow again. And please consider having your own hosting screening discussion with your community, your following, your organization. And again, thanks again, everybody.